Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com. And tonight's Darkstream is Fail Faster, Why Gammas Don't Play Sports. So good evening to the evil legion of evil, to the vile faceless minions, to the dread ilk, the ilk, and as always, or as recently, the bears. We've run into a lot of the kind of people that I call gammas. It is a behavioral pattern and social rank that everyone is familiar with. Everybody knows the type. Everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about, and yet it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Just the discussion of the topic makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And we saw this kind of behavior. We saw these patterns of behavior appearing a lot in the last couple days, which was kind of remarkable because who cares about Joe Rogan? Who cares about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Why would anyone take offense to the idea that Joe Rogan is not a supreme ninja with world-class martial arts fighting experience? Don't complain about the volume. I've already addressed this. Okay? I have to admit, given all of our audio tribulations from early on, it's kind of tempting to just ban people who talk it up. If you've got an issue with the volume, turn it up. All you're doing is irritating everybody when you're complaining about it, okay? So don't do that. I've already got a cloud lifter on order. That will take care of the sound issue. But right now, this particular microphone has very, very low gain. So anyhow. So somebody said, well, what was up with that? Why were there so many people who were spurging out and going all over the place, losing their little minds over stuff that, frankly, nobody really cares about? And the reason's very simple. Cavalry Bear is right. I have a Shure SM7B, and I need the cloud lifter for it. So anyhow, the gamma behavioral pattern, and I keep stressing that. Because I don't want people obsessing over what they are. What's my rank? Everybody wanted to be an alpha back when Royce and Roosh were talking about alphas versus betas. I later introduced the concept of the sigma because there needed to be a description of a certain type of male who was alpha status sexually, but not socially. And immediately, everyone started announcing that they were truly sigmas, all right? Because there's this perception of it being better. And so it's not about that. That's what I'm trying to make it very clear, because when you focus on what you are and you start trying to claim that what you are is the best, then you completely miss the utility of the sociosexual hierarchy. And so, we've talked about how some of the traits of the gamma behavioral pattern uh, is low status, um, and general sexual unsuccessful um, history. Uh, you know, Women tend to intensely dislike gammas. I've had women tell me that they didn't know what the term was. They tended to think of what we call a gamma as a sort of guy who makes them want to punch them in the mouth. The kind of guy who makes shivers run down their spine. And, so when you look at this, when you look at the way that women react to gammas, then, that gives you more and more understanding. And so everybody wants to be something better, but if you're focused on the status, you're going to miss the utility. You're going to miss the ability to use this understanding to improve your life and actually to improve your social status. So one of the things that I've noticed is that gammas are constantly harping on two things. They constantly harp on the idea that you are envious. If you criticize someone, the only possible reason for doing so is envy and jealousy, and they also focus on how you must be a failure. If you're an enemy, then you are a failure. If you are criticizing someone, then you are envious. And we see this all the time. We see this constantly. As soon as I started criticizing Jordan Peterson, which I was doing so for a very good reason. When I first started criticizing Jordan Peterson, I didn't know who he was, what he did. I knew very, very little about him. All I knew was that he was wrong with regards to his claims to explain why Jewish people were disproportionately successful in the United States. And so, I knew he was wrong. And so I called him to task for that, corrected him, explained why he was wrong. And suddenly, all these fans of his descend upon me to say, you're envious, you're so jealous. Wait, so I'm telling someone that he is factually wrong because I'm jealous? How does this make any sense whatsoever? It makes no sense whatsoever. Then we go on to this latest confrontation with the Joe Rogan fans. And I mean, the thing with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I've got nothing against Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu whatsoever. That was just a echo of a consequence of the Joe Rogan thing. Suddenly, I've got all these people telling me that I'm lying about stuff that is directly from my life, stuff that I know about better than anyone else, stuff that there are literally hundreds of people who can testify to the truth of various things. And so, I mean, like here's a good example. You can tell that this commenter probably has at least a gamma strain to them. Is Vox clout chasing Jordan and Rogan? No. I'm not clout chasing them. I don't want to be anything like either one of them. I don't want what they have. I like what I do. I like my life. Okay? And so just the fact that people go, the kind of mind that goes immediately to that idea that you must be criticizing on the basis of envy, or that you are being dishonest in order to inflate yourself. Those are intrinsically gamma instincts. It's something that it's the way it's the way that their mind naturally tends to work. And as Jester just pointed out, it is emotional projection. It's emotional projection. And so and what a lot of you probably don't understand, because you are video followers. Like somebody just said, Vox, why are you doing this? I'm doing this because my readers were asking me for several years to get into doing video, to start explaining some of the concepts that I've introduced in my books and that I've introduced in my blog, on my blog. And so, they actually encouraged me to put together something called Voxiversity, which you can see there's a different channel called Voxiversity. It's where we put together the concepts, and it's a little bit more polished, and there's a video production values and that sort of thing. And the Darkstream is actually a offshoot from that, because we realized that we couldn't produce enough. It takes way too long to produce a Voxiversity video. We're hoping to get to the point where we do 2 long ones and 2 short ones a month, but that's not practical right now. So I do the Darkstreams, and then we also separately do the Voxiversities. But I'm doing this because I was asked to do it by my strongest supporters. The blog is called Vox Populi. It's voxday.blogspot.com. And so I'm not doing this out of a desire to fulfill my ego. All right. Now, I'm going to try to do it well. I was terrible. If you watch the earlier videos, I was terrible on video. The production values of the stream were terrible. The webcam was bad. The audio was terrible. Everything was bad because I didn't know what I was doing. But I said, bear with me. I'll get better. And the problem is that a lot of you are not readers, right? And so that's why we're doing this, because I can't communicate to you as a writer if you don't read. How can I get these concepts, many of which are very, very valuable, how can I get these concepts across to you in my books if you don't read? Well, we're learning that we need to do more audiobooks. Audiobooks have always been an afterthought. We've published over 105 books now, and I think we've done a total of 43 audiobooks. And so we're now focusing on getting more audiobooks out. We're working on doing these videos. We're doing the Darkstreams. We're doing the Voxiversity. And so that's why we're doing this, because there are a lot of fans of the books who wanted us to share these ideas more broadly. And that's what we're doing. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible for me to envy anyone. I envy Umberto Eco. Okay, he died, last year, but um, I envy his writing. Tanith Lee, I envy Tanith Lee's writing. She's just got this natural dark beauty to her prose that I can never even try to fake, and I do not have. You know, there are a lot of people. No, that's not really true. That's not. There are a number of people, talented people that I envy. I envied Prince's musical genius. You know, I mean, it was as somebody who spent a little bit of time in the music industry in Minneapolis, to see how complete a musical genius he was from the perspective of talking to his bandmates, talking to his producers. I've got direct connections to a number of those people. The guy who produced the Diamond and Pearls album, his drummer, Bobby Z. These are all people that I had connections to because of my own time in the music industry in Minneapolis. And all of us envied Prince's musical genius. And so, but to say that, I envy Jordan Peterson, do you understand that I have been more famous globally than Jordan Peterson for most of the last 20 years? Even though he's been chasing media and chasing fame, and I turned my back on it. I don't envy what he has. Frankly, I think he sold his soul for it. Joe Rogan is more honest. Joe Rogan worked hard, but I don't want to sit and do a podcast talking to, people from the UFC. And I certainly don't want to spend my time talking to people like Ben Shapiro and Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. I mean, that would be a freaking nightmare, So, if I was going to envy somebody who is a media intellectual, I would envy Taleb. Taleb is really rich. His books actually matter. I think he's totally wrong about the IQ thing. But, again, if I was going to envy somebody like that, that's who it would be. So why are they focusing on this? Why are they saying, oh, you must envy this? Why you must be a failure? How is it possible that you could have been a high school track star or a Division I sprinter or a halfway decent martial artist? What's really funny is that they will accuse you of failure even when it's manifestly not true, even when it's totally false. I get told, actually, they've largely stopped doing it. That's how you always know that you've become so successful at something that they don't even try to call you a failure anymore. But like for example, I don't put my name on the games that I design anymore because I don't want people to get caught up in my political involvement and that sort of thing. But it's always funny how people would say you're a failed game designer, a failed game developer. My best-selling game did 6 million units. It did more than 6 million units. Sextuple platinum. How often do you see me described as multi-platinum selling game designer? They don't ever say that. And what's funny is that they'll say, "Oh, you're a bad writer. You're a terrible writer." And yet, people compare my epic fantasy to Tolkien. They used to compare it to George Martin. Now, most of the readers actually think it's better than George Martin's stuff, and they're comparing it to Tolkien. Now, they're not comparing it favorably to Tolkien. You know, even my own family members who have read it, I was like, yeah, it's really good. It's not as good as Lord of the Rings, but it's really good. You know? And so, let's see. Question: Taleb's still railing against IQ. Will you be addressing any more of his arguments? No, I don't think so. I think he's been emotionally triggered, and there's no point in doing that. So, let's see here. Hang on a second. I've got to nuke somebody here. There we are. Yeah. So anyhow, why are they so obsessed with failure? And the reason they're so obsessed with failure is because it terrifies them. And I didn't understand this until I had the opportunity to talk to a guy who had worked very hard to lift himself up from being a gamma. And he was someone who, he explained to me, he had been made into a gamma by his father. His father constantly told him what a failure he was, constantly got on his case, and was always setting him up to fail, and then would act as if failure was, was ruinous to your life. Once a failure, always a failure. You know? And so he explained to me that they believe that failure is a one-time thing. That if you fail, that you're worthless, that you'll never succeed. And that's why they're constantly trying to pretend that their success was easy, that their success was intrinsic. John Scalzi, the science fiction author, is a king gamma. He is the epitome of gamma. If you want to understand what a gamma is, go to his blog, whatever.scalzi.com, and just read a few entries. Read him talking about himself especially. And that's when you will begin to understand it much better. It's funny, like you'll see that even when they do something that's very intelligent, and what John Scalzi did was very intelligent. He was having trouble breaking in. He was having trouble getting published as a science fiction author. He had self-published some stuff, hadn't had any success in it. And it's kind of interesting because Scalzi and I actually kind of started the same way in terms of how we broke into our various industries and so forth. But the way that he managed to get published by Tor Books, which is still the largest publisher of science fiction books. And so what he did was he wrote Old Man's War as an intentional ripoff of Robert Heinlein. And he explained that he wrote up a big post about how this was a demonstration of how you could write like Robert Heinlein. And then he sent an email to Patrick Nielsen Hayden, who's now the publisher and vice president, but at the time was the main editor of the science fiction line. He sent him an email saying, I'm not submitting this. This isn't a submission. I just thought you might be interested in how I show that you can do a color by numbers approach to Robert Heinlein. So what he was doing was sneaking around the slush pile sneaking around the whole uh, defensive system that the publisher had set up because he had been trying to get through it and had been failing. So he very intelligently comes up with a way to get around it, and it works. It works beautifully. And he not only had success with that, but he actually parlayed it into a very, very lucrative, $3 million, 13-book contract, despite the fact that he's a very mediocre author. He's increasingly shown himself to be a bad writer. The first book was successful mostly because, and I actually reviewed it positively. I didn't realize at the time that he was just ripping off Robert Heinlein, and that the few parts that I thought were bad were the only original parts. But here's what's interesting about it. Here's what's very interesting about the whole thing. Being a gamma, he can't say yes. I very intelligently figured out a way around the slush pile, and I managed to get a book contract out of it, and that worked. It worked great. My plan worked great. Instead, he denies it. Oh no, I didn't mean to try to do that. I just succeeded organically and naturally, and it was just my talent that was recognized by the publisher, and it was just really lucky that I happened to be showing him how you could imitate Heinlein. I had no idea that he would be interested in publishing it. That is so nonsensical. It almost defies the normal imagination. I mean, you came up with a plan, you executed, it was successful beyond your wildest dreams, so naturally you deny that you did it. Why? Because the gamma always has to be naturally successful. The gamma always has to succeed without trying. And that's why it's part of the fundamental dishonesty of the gamma. It's part of the delusion bubble that he constructs. Because the only way he can get himself to try things is if he can convince himself that he's not trying, because then he can hide from himself the fact that he might fail. But here's the thing. Failure... Cubby Bear, don't tell me what I do or do too much. You know the way Owen bans people for stuff? I ban people for telling me what to do or what not to do, okay? I do what I do. I am what I am. You're not going to change me, so I'm 50 years old. So just leave it. If you can't take it, tune into Joe Rogan or something. Anyhow, so the thing is, everybody who succeeds is going to fail. And what's funny to me is that I have failed so massively, so hugely, that you would not believe the size of my failures. You would not believe the amount of wealth I have missed out on due to my own mistakes. Okay? You want to know the biggest single mistake I ever made? I didn't even realize that I had made this mistake until about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. But I had the opportunity. I mean, I'll tell you the big failure that some of you know about that a lot of you don't believe. But one of my biggest failures was that Chris Taylor of Electronic Arts and I came up with the idea for using 3D hardware to do computer games. At the time, it was everybody thought that video and MPEG decompression was going to be the future of video games, because 3D they hadn't really developed texture mapping yet. So 3D was very ugly. But we knew that 3D was the future because there were so many possibilities with the interface. There's so many different things that you could do that we knew that eventually the graphics would improve, because graphics always do. And at the time, I worked for my father's my father's high resolution graphics hardware company, which made very high resolution graphics, 1280 by 1024 at the time, all the way up to 1600 by 1200. This is back when the regular computer graphics were 320 by 200. So the graphics were much, much better. Beautiful, picture perfect stuff, right? Somehow, despite the fact, when I was 15, oh, I'm sorry, that's the previous one. So I'm 21, and we developed the first 3D acceleration chip for games. I actually named it the 3GA, which was a great name, you know. CGA, EGA, VGA, 3GA. So anyhow, we had problems because the lead chip designer got a brain tumor. My dad didn't spend the money on the proper tools. So they were kind of, really stretching the capabilities of the existing software tools they had. And so that slowed them down a lot. And then the worst of all, they didn't focus on games. Now, I knew they weren't going to focus on games, so I didn't really try. They were a CAD company, computer-aided design, AutoCAD. That's what they were focused on. And so I would have liked them to focus on the games, but I never really made that case. And I don't regard that as a mistake, because there's no chance in hell they would have dropped the window acceleration. They definitely wouldn't have dropped the CAD aspect. In fact, the chip did turn out to be a successful CAD chip and a successful Windows accelerator, but it was very small. Those markets were very small compared to the games market. Now, there was a guy, and there's somebody who can tell you all about this stuff too. His name's Jensen Huang. He's the founder of NVIDIA. NVIDIA was 18 to 24 months behind us. He used to call up from a company that he pretended was a game developer called Jensen Huang, or called Jensen Software, and he would call up and pretend to be a game developer to try to find out what we were doing. And so, anyhow, the big problem, though, was that, and this was the huge mistake, is that I kept telling this designer, there has to be perspective correct texture mapping. There has to be perspective correct texture mapping. So my friend and I do a little game that eventually turned into Rebel Moon, and we created the graphics, we created the levels and stuff, and so then we turn. The chip is finally there. The day comes, the chip's finally there. We're still like a year ahead of NVIDIA. Creative Labs is offering millions of dollars to buy either the company, buy the chip, et cetera, et cetera. And then we turn it on, and all the lines are, and you suddenly realize, I said, well, turn the perspective correction. Why isn't the perspective correction on? Did we get the software library wrong? Did we not turn it on? And the engineer goes, what perspective correction? We're like, what? I've been in here asking you about this for the past 2 years, saying, did you get the perspective? Did you get the texture mapping? Well, I got the texture. I didn't know it had to be perspective correct. Of course it had to be perspective correct. Why would you ever not correct the perspective? It's useless without it. There's no hardware acceleration for it. And so anyhow, that was my second biggest mistake. And that mistake was something that cost billions of dollars. Look at what NVIDIA is worth. That should have been my dad's company. Now, there's another big mistake that I'll tell you about some other time, but there's an even bigger mistake, and I didn't even realize I made it. I had no idea. I was 15. I was spending all my time playing games like Ultima and Wizardry and stuff on the Apple II. And then I would go to my dad's office and I would mess around with this high resolution graphic stuff. And I would do things like draw a Duran Duran logo or something. And at no point at any time did I ever connect the fact that I could pretty easily hire have my dad or somebody hire a programmer and simply recreate the little ugly games that we were seeing on the Apple II and create them in beautiful 1280 by 1024 256 color graphics. We could have owned the entire computer game industry if I had simply made that connection. All I needed to do was make that connection. And so, I can't even imagine how successful we could have been by simply doing that. Hiring one artist and one programmer. Yeah, somebody pointed out that I also turned down the StarCraft novel. Blizzard wanted me to write it, and I said no because actually I first said yes, but then I wrote the outline for it, and they said, yeah, we like it. It's really great, but it'd be really great if instead at the end, the Queen of Thorns, she does something bad and then, laughs evilly, ha ha ha, and disappears. And I thought, I don't think I want to work with these people. That's probably the only time that I've been, too much of a artistic purist. The dumbest thing I ever did. I mean, that was just purely stupid. Like these other things were mistakes that maybe I couldn't have fixed. What age was this? The big, huge mistake was at 15, and that was a failure to see the obvious that was right before me. The second thing was I was 23, I believe, and the novel thing was when I was 27. So those were all big mistakes that cost me considerably. Big failures. Now, do I regret them? No. I mean, why do I bring them up? Why do I talk about them? I'm not sitting here obsessing over them going, damn it, this is why I don't own a castle. This is why I'm not ridiculously rich. I'm not saying there's not times when I'm thinking, when you're like paying your bills and stuff that you're just thinking, geez, it would have been nice if if I hadn't missed that boat. But the thing is that you need to learn from it. Now I'm learning from it. Like, now I'm paying attention to this stuff. I'm not late to YouTube. I actually, started thinking about getting into YouTube and doing some of this stuff, back before PewDiePie got into the game thing and whatever. I'm not saying that I could have done it and been successful, but at least I did see it. And I wasn't good at it. I didn't know how to do it. So it wasn't, it wasn't to be because I wasn't good enough, but it wasn't a mistake, And so, if you don't look at your failures, if you don't embrace your failures and try to figure out, okay, why did I miss that? What am I missing now? And sometimes it's about timing. We've got, we're now starting to sell audiobooks at archavencomics.com. We've now got a store going. It's doing really well. In fact, by the way, if you are interested in our audiobooks, we have a new format. instead of downloading single MP3 files, it's now all in one big MP4 file. But it's a really nice format because depending on the software, it's got chapters, it's got all that sort of stuff. And so, if you want to, if you're interested in books like Jordanetics, in the Last Closet, they're up there, and they are. I think Jordanetics is $14.99 for 7 hours and 32 minutes. Last Closet is something like 14 hours, and that's only $19.99. So it's a really, really good. It's a really good deal, and we're working on continuing to improve the formats and so forth. M. Deli Rosa says those just seem like more like missed opportunities than actual failures. No, they were failures, absolutely failures. It's one thing to miss an opportunity because, okay. The first one is possibly a missed opportunity because I just didn't see it. But the thing is, I should have seen it. I am smart enough. I had all the information I needed. I do have the excuse of the fact that I was only 15 at the time. But these other things that, even though other people were involved in that sort of thing, they were absolutely failures. How is Arts of Dark coming along? Slowly but surely. A Sea of Skulls will be out soon, and the audiobook for A Throne of Bones has been recorded. It is over 32 hours. It might be as much as 36 hours, and it's great. So, anyhow, I've got time to take some questions now. So if you have some questions, go ahead and ask them. Let's see. Literature allows you to interact with the greatest minds in history. It does. I mean, literature does. Nonfiction does. It's great. Also, if somebody that wants to know where the audiobooks are, there's a link below the video. So you can find the link there for the ebooks, for the audiobooks, and for the print editions. Oh, also, for those of you who have been asking about super chats, I think we can probably introduce them tomorrow. So, for Sea of Skulls, it's added chapters. Yes, nothing that was in there already will change. There's just going to be a lot more. Thoughts on the possibility of replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg? I think that Trump will have the opportunity to nominate a new one this year, a new associate justice this year. Let's see. How is the failure to include the perspective correction my fault? Because I did not. I told the guy, but I should have known that he was being reluctant about it, and I should have made sure that there was some sort of something in place to make sure that it was in there. I've learned this. I apply that in my in our production processes now. We've learned not to trust the technical people, not to screw things up. Technical people screw stuff up all the freaking time. I naturally had a tendency to believe, oh, he's highly technical, he's very detail oriented. Of course they won't make those kind of mistakes. And then you see them do it again. It's because they're constantly doing stuff like, oh, I need to make one change, so I'm going to turn this thing off while I make the change. Then they forget to turn it back on. This happens almost constantly. And it's the fault of the person who doesn't put the processes in place to detect that from happening. Why does he have a straitjacket on? Because he's crazy. Could he sue you for that? No. That'd be like saying, can Donald Trump sue everybody who, draws him looking crazy? Let's see. No, see, Charlemagne says technical people will do exactly what you tell them and only that. That's not true. what I'm talking about is technical people are really bad about checking their own work. They say, "Oh, I'll just change this one thing," and then they don't. Are video games inherently evil? No. Um, let's see. How ahead of his time was Frank Herbert? Considerably. Um, probability that evolution is real? Negligible. Uh, I are you when you say have you read Musashi? Are you talking about the Seven Swords or whatever that is, the Art of the Sword? Um, I believe I read it a long, long time ago. Didn't leave much of an impression on me. Is there any other source to read you about your theory about alphas, gammas outside of Alpha Game? Yeah, read SJW's Always Lie. That's got, and also SJW's Always Double Down. Um, actually, no, SJW's Always Double Down. That has a whole chapter on it. Do you support merit-based immigration? No. I don't support any immigration for the United States. There is absolutely no need for it. Let's see. Ever read the Far Kingdom series by Alan Cole and Chris Bunch? No, I have not. Oh, Book of Five Rings. Yeah, I've read that. Your take on Stoicism? I think Stoicism is possibly the best pure philosophy out there for approaching life. It's not a substitute for the Christian religion and the Christian faith, but it is a very practical approach to life. Did Jordanetics spur more sales of the SJW series? Not particularly. In light of everything you talked about, how would you recommend approving? That's a topic for another day, but the main thing is for gammas, tell the truth relentlessly. What do you propose if you find evolution false? I don't find evolution false. I am a skeptic that the species evolved through the process of natural selection, sexual selection, genetic flow, and gene drift. I think it is far more likely that any other possibility from divine design to alien design to computer simulation, I think any of those options are more likely. For slow readers, is it just as beneficial to listen to books rather than read them? It totally depends on how you learn. If you're an auditory learner, you should listen to audiobooks. I find audiobooks to be way too slow, but I'm an exceptionally fast reader. And so I never, ever listen to audiobooks except for when we're in the car on a trip because I'm not allowed to read a book while I'm driving. But if you're an auditory learner, then you should always try to read or listen to audiobooks rather than reading when you can. Do you think companies like id Software are trying to push against the SJW agenda? I would expect so. Why are gammas into cats and alphas into dogs? Because gammas don't like the responsibility and they don't like, they're not loyal people. People who are not loyal people don't like dogs. That's one of the reasons why people don't trust people who don't like dogs. Are you worried about antibiotics running out? I'm not worried about them running out. I'm worried about them becoming ineffective. Have you ever thought about killing yourself? No, I'm not even remotely suicidal, and also I am a Christian, and so I believe that is fundamentally wrong. I love the Sisters of Mercy. I too am a fan. I wouldn't say I love them, but I do like them. Thoughts on Warcraft 3 Reforged? Will it revive a great game and corner the esports market, or will it kill a classic by flooding the field with noobs who can't play and don't love the game? I think it will probably be an SJW fest that will be very disappointing to a lot of people. I used to have a Rhodesian Ridgeback. Actually, I'm happy to say that we got some positive news today. He's actually gained a kilo, and so which is 2.5 pounds. So it looks like, it's a trend up. It's far too soon to say that he's out of the woods, but we are happy about this. Um, David Porter, do you ignore me, or do I ask? I don't. You have to understand, these things just flash past me. It, if I'm not looking there, then I don't see it. We'll get the super chats going soon, and then you can make sure that I pay attention to your question, because I will answer any question that is on super chats, um, as long as it's not something that is about too personal or about my family. I do not answer questions about my family. Um, let's see. Ever read Francis Schaeffer? No, I'm not really into reading theologians. Do you support any football team? Um, what do you think of rabbits as pets? Horrible idea. They die way too easily. Vox, I'm a young voiceover artist. I would love to get involved with Castalia House. Would you consider me? Sure, we'll consider anybody. I'm not the audio guy, but if you send me an email, voxday@gmail.com, I'll pass it on to our audio editor. Can you break the legs of the people at Bethesda? Well, I did actually hire Julian LaFay away from them, but that didn't seem to slow them down at all. Will you stream with Owen again? Certainly, if he asks me to. What's your opinion of Larry Niven's work? I never thought it was as impressive as Jerry Pournelle did. I like Jerry Pournelle's work better than Larry's. Can you recommend an Italian city where a computer programmer... I don't like questions like those. I mean, everybody's different. Travel around and figure out where you like, where it interests you. Would you support high IQ immigration? LOL. Okay, first of all, don't do LOLs. That's a gamma signifier. Those are some other gamma signifiers. It seems like you seem to be saying LOL. Why is it that... Anyhow, why is it that I don't talk about the Bible and the teachings within? I do occasionally. I'm not a preacher, and I'm not a teacher, and I don't want the biblical responsibility that the Bible imposes on people who put themselves forward as spiritual leaders and teachers of the Bible. Why do gammas naturally obey the 3 rules of SJWs? Because there's a tremendous overlap between gammas and SJWs. Not all gammas are SJWs, but most male SJWs are gammas. Vox, as an evolution skeptic, you haven't crossed over into believer of creationism. No, I mean, when you're a skeptic about something, that says nothing about what else you believe. Seems to me that you are arrogant. LOL. The Vox, how sophisticated is your approach to the keto diet? Totally unsophisticated. I don't even consider myself to be following it. I just... I mean, tonight I had spaghetti bolognese with a good red wine. And then I had a dark chocolate ice cream thing. So, but for lunch, I just had protein and wine. So there's a lot of red wine in my diet. So, let's see. Vox, I have 2 cigarettes left. That's my signal to get going, huh? Let's see. Should I go to the store or make my wife do it? I don't know. What store is it and who needs the stuff? Why is Merlot the best wine? I wouldn't say it is. I like it. I mean, I also like Tempranillo. I also like del Duero. The Priorats are great. I'm not helping Owen with the flat Earth debate. I know literally nothing about it. Um, yeah, he said it seems to me like you're not in keto. No, that's what I said. I'm not. All I did to at my absolute peak weight, I got up to 192, and I cut that down to 175 by significantly reducing my carbohydrate intake. But at no point in time did I ever stop eating chocolate or drinking wine. So, but I am. You got to keep in mind, I work out all the time, and I also play soccer for a team that is pretty intense. I mean, we used to start in March, but now with our crazy new captain the last 2 years, we actually start in February. And I mean, our practices are literally an hour longer than they used to be. It's just crazy. No, I'm not going to grow a beard. So no belly flab, not now. I had a bit when I was up at 192. At the time I was kind of digging it. I was thinking it's all muscle, and it's like, yeah, no, it's not. you don't realize, because when you still have the muscle on you, and there's just like this layer of fat over it all, it still looks pretty good. You just don't realize how much fat there is. Have you heard that Britain is only 60% white now? That sounds like an exaggeration to me. I mean, I'm not surprised at all. I've been in London and been on trains where there's not a single white person. But I wouldn't be surprised if you're confusing London with that. I'm not going to put any videos up of my old. I have no martial arts videos, and I'm certainly not going to put up any soccer or track videos. Let's see. Isn't it creepy that Peterson's diet is composed entirely of flesh? Hey, as long as it's not human flesh, I think we're doing okay. How can I convince high IQ women in my social circle to have children with their husbands? Make fun of them. Women can't stand to be mocked. Just, tell them things like, oh, the only reason that you're afraid to have children is because you're afraid that they'll be stupid and that sort of thing. Trying to rationally convince women of something like that is never going to work. Are you a Juventus fan? Shut your mouth. Forza Milan. Let's see. Are we sure Peterson isn't eating human flesh? Well, we're not. We don't know. Yeah, whoever it was, they confused it. The UK is not 60% white. It's London that is only 60% white and only 45% white British. Unofficial Bear. Hey, Vox. Happy to be able to catch you tonight. Sorry late. Thank you for what you do. You are welcome. Thank you for tuning in. And thanks for being patient with my subpar audio. The part is on order. Next week, it'll be there. Cru Bourgeois are some of the best Bordeaux's for the money. Okay. Who is winning the Super Bowl? I have no idea. So, all right. Well, thanks for tuning in. We didn't actually get around to why gammas don't play sports, but of course, it's because they're afraid of failure. That's why they don't play sports. So after all this time, you finally get the answer. Gammas don't play sports because they're afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of failure. Try to fail faster. The faster you fail, the faster you can move on to the next thing. So don't delay your failures. Embrace it, learn from it, move on. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.